When you look at a digitally generated face that is almost perfect, your body often reacts before your mind can explain why. The skin texture might be flawless, but if the gaze remains locked and vacant, it triggers a physical tightening in your chest. We usually attribute this revulsion to the limitations of current technology, a simple reaction to clunky animation, poor lighting, or the glitchy feel of modern artificial intelligence. However, our instinctual responses to fear did not evolve in a vacuum of 21st century software. The cold sweat and the spike in heart rate are biological legacies established long before we ever attempted to simulate a human face. In 1919, Sigmund Freud analyzed this specific dread through the German word Unheimliche. He argued that the uncanny is the terrifying experience of encountering something deeply familiar and old established in the mind that has been estranged through the process of repression. This psychological estrangement manifests in the physical world through the biological expressions of terror Darwin documented. He noted that we share involuntary responses with other animals, trembling, bristling hair, and cold perspiration, that serve as a primitive alarm system. Evolution is a brutally efficient process that rarely maintains a trait without a survival purpose. If our biology maintains a hyper-tuned alarm for things that look almost human but aren't, it suggests we spent a significant portion of our history evading a threat that fit that exact description. In 1970, robotics professor Masahiro Mori attempted to plot the coordinates of this biological alarm. He identified a specific relationship between an object's appearance and our emotional response, a concept he named the Uncanny Valley. This chart shows that as an object looks more human, our sense of affinity for it climbs steadily. But at a very high degree of realism, that affinity plunges into a valley of revulsion. This drop marks the moment the brain stops seeing a relatable character and starts seeing an unsettling other. Mori noted that adding movement to the object makes the effect more extreme. The peaks of affinity become higher, but the slopes of the valley steepen, making the sensation of eeriness far more intense than it would be for a static figure. At the very bottom of this valley, Mori placed the still, pale face of a human corpse. This suggests the Uncanny Valley functions as a survival mechanism. It provided early humans with a visceral repulsion to proximal biological dangers, forces like disease, decay, and death that could be avoided if identified instantly. But if the instinct is merely about avoiding disease or corpses, it doesn't explain why a moving, living robot often feels more threatening than a static mannequin. Freud's research points toward a repressed belief he called animism. This is the primitive human conviction that inanimate objects possess a hidden capacity to come to life, or that our own thoughts can physically manifest in the world. The feeling of the uncanny arises when a belief we thought we had intellectually outgrown, like the idea of a living doll, is suddenly confirmed by a physical experience. The moving robot forces a regression to a primitive state of mind we believed was buried. We have long navigated this fear through art. Lifelike puppets, such as those used in traditional bunraku theater, demand our attention precisely because they walk the line between the mechanical and the animate, mimicking the doubles that Freud noted appear throughout human mythology. Our discomfort with humanoid AI isn't necessarily a fear of the future. It is a resurrection of fears from our evolutionary infancy, pulling us back into a world where the boundary between the living and the non-living is dangerously blurred. These psychological reactions are deeply rooted in our physical inheritance. They are innate behaviors, passed down across generations because they provided a clear survival advantage. Darwin identified that many of our expressive actions are inherited from ancestors we share with other primates. A snarl or a baring of teeth is not a learned behavior. It is a hardwired biological defense mechanism. Darwin also noted that humans possess an instinctive recognition of these expressions. Because we are so specialized in reading each other, even a minute deviation in how a face moves signals a threat. For our ancestors, an entity that mimicked human expressions but failed to execute them perfectly was in immediate danger, perhaps a carrier of lethal disease or a rival predatory hominid species competing for the exact same resources. The Uncanny Valley was preserved in our DNA because the ancestors who felt that specific chill were the ones who moved away from the threat. They survived precisely because they didn't wait to see if the almost human figure was friendly. The discomfort triggered by a synthetic face is your oldest biological software operating exactly as it was intended. It is an involuntary, successful execution of a defense mechanism that has protected our species for millions of years. There is a deep irony in our current technological goals. As we work to create AI and robots that look and move exactly like us, we are ignoring the warnings written into our own biology. We are engineering the very animistic threats and artificial doubles that our ancestors learned to fear through generations of trial and error. The next time you see a hyper-realistic android and feel a cold knot of dread, recognize that sensation for what it is. That chill isn't a glitch in the machine. It is the echo of your ancestors screaming at you to run.